Welcome to All Worn Out. I'm your host, Warren Meredith. On the show today, Bee Composed of London, Ontario. She's a musician, a music teacher, and has a great event coming up. Women Rock for Men's Mental Health. Hi, everybody. Welcome to All Worn Out. It's a podcast about music. It's a podcast about whatever you're passionate about, and it's a podcast about what our guests are passionate about. Today, I'd like to welcome to the podcast our very special guest, Bee Composed, a musician from London, Ontario, and she's running very cool events in the area that we're gonna dig into and find out about a little bit later on. But first and foremost, I want to find out about B. May I call
Yeah,
you B?
absolutely.
Okay, so we're gonna start by finding out who B is, and you have a cool name. I mean, I wish like years ago I was worn the Ginger Fox Meredith, but it didn't work out for me. And I don't know why, but maybe, maybe it was just a little bit too much. And
Maybe just a little
anyways,
too on the nose with those
you can't.
flowing ginger locks. Who knows?
R- right? You gotta love yourself, but maybe not too much. Um, but anyways, so Be Composed is a very cool name, and you can check out becomposed.com to learn a lot about this wonderful artist. So tell us about yourself and about your name,
Yeah.
if you would.
Maybe I'll just kind of start with the name because I'm Be Composed, which is hilarious because if you've ever seen me perform on stage, I am anything but. I am ridiculous on the keys, smashing things around. Half the time, I'm not even looking at my keyboard. And usually I'm just having a blast performing and engaging the audience and being very real about mental health and shit. So it makes sense that I am all over on top of all that.
That's amazing. I really like that you're able to talk about that stuff and that you're upfront about it. I'm gonna be honest right now with you. We had I had like 11 guys on this podcast in a row, and I'm sick of talking to guys right now. And I had two girls that were supposed to be in there, but they both rescheduled, and unrelated. And so then I just got stuck talking to dude after dude. And so you're a breath of fresh air to the podcast. And I think it's really awesome that we're going to talk about men's mental health since we had all these guys on the podcast. And I think we've got quite a few watching. And I do think it's so important just for everyone. Like, I have mental health stuff that I have to deal with and I work with, and with my doctor and my therapist, whatever it might be. And my goodness, it's something that we all have to talk about with ourselves, and
Yes.
and talk about with those we really trust and we really love, because I know it's difficult, but I really liked what I was reading on your website and all about that. But if we could go back in time, um, whereabouts were you born? I ask pretty much everybody this. Where did you
Sure.
start?
Starting is hard because I've actually moved 25 times. So technically, if I go back to the very beginning, it's still southwestern Ontario. Born in St. Thomas, but lived all over in like Windsor and Leamington, LaSalle, and eventually making my way here to London. And I made that switch young enough that I consider London and like the northern parts of London out in Hicktown, Lucan, that's all kind of my hometown area in terms of like where I actually developed my identity and my musical identity was kind of starting around there, especially in high school.
Okay, so your musical identity, you're saying, starts to develop around in high
Yeah,
school,
like
and
I grew up with a name I absolutely hated. I won't go into the very specifics because I usually save that just for people who I'm close to. But suffice to say, my initials were BS, and that already is hard enough to grow up with. But anyway, so then I started going by B in high school, and it really just resonated chord with me. I was doing the Royal Conservatory of Music privately at the time. That's where all my education is based from. And then when I got into university and I was exploring music, not as much through schooling, but outside of schooling, it really gave me the opportunity to like flesh out my musical understanding, not just from a classical background, but also here's how you actually apply it in today's world and make it interactive and actually
Mm.
use it. But yeah, so then around, oh God, I started teaching after that. I've been teaching now for 15 years, and I think about 7 years in, it was my students who said, Miss B, you tell us to perform at recitals, but why don't you perform at recitals? You're not wrong. So then I ended up starting to perform there a little bit more and demonstrating more of what they needed to do in their recitals. And then, of course, a couple years later, it was Miss B, why do you tell us to make music, but you don't make music? Shit. So anyway, then I started actually being more serious about making music, and I realized, okay, that's that next step. I know the next question is why aren't you actually out there performing? So that's when the name of like Be Composed, Miss B School of Music, it all just kind of flowed in from the very start of this name of hating my birth name, my given name, and going to something that I much prefer. That it very much resonates true for me. Yeah, so having a dead name is something I'm very familiar with. For yeah. Anyway,
Well, I think, a lot of times we talk about artists as, being these people who are vulnerable and opening themselves up to others at their own peril. And it sounds like your students helped you on that journey. And it also sounds like you went through a lot in your younger years and you overcame a lot. And I think that when you're becoming an artist and you have all these things that you want to bring out, through your dream journal or whatever it may be, that how you're getting these inner things to escape and touch other people in the best of ways. It's not easy, and it's definitely a journey. And I wanted to touch on the Royal Conservatory because I definitely studied the Royal Conservatory for a number of years, but I did not finish it, and nor did I get near where a lot of the people I know who are really great at it, like level 9 or 10. I think is really difficult even to get by. So if congratulations and kudos on that, first of all, for doing that and sticking with that because gosh, that was difficult. And I just remember begging my piano teacher at the time when I was like 11 or whatever, being like, please just teach me the blues. Will you teach me how to play, you know, Chuck Berry or something? I'd love to learn some rock and roll. And he would be like, once you learn this, you'll be able to play whatever you want. And like, it won't be no thing. And, I understand what he was saying. And he was so right. But a part of me going back wishes that he would just teach me a few blues scales and then move on. You know what I mean? But anyways, that's just my perspective going
yeah,
back in
that's the great
time.
gratification when
Um,
you're sitting there being like, why do I care about the theory? I just want to play. The playing has nothing to do with the theory. And then it's only later, like with my students, I take them through the RCM either officially or unofficially. Or frankly, I've gotten to the point that I don't even necessarily take all my students through the RCM. I get them to do the first grade because it's really easy. It's easy to get them shifting from those basic beginner books into their first RCM and be like, okay, learn one song from here. How did that go? Okay, learn a second, learn a third, learn a fourth. And then being like, now we could keep studying this level, or you're technically there. Let's just quickly add in some scales and chords, and I'll just show you how to do the sight training and try a first exam. If it doesn't stick and you really hate it, no worries. We'll use them as just a source material. And we'll keep learning about the theory side of stuff at a much more advanced rate. And at that point, I'll take my students who are a little bit on the older side, like maybe 8 through 11 and higher, and I'll get them started on a more advanced theory approach that moves quickly at whatever speed they're able to handle. So, absolutely, I'm still, now that I can sort of see through the matrix, I do very much still believe in like that theory concept of if you have your fundamentals, you can do anything. But I don't focus on holding students back through that in the same way. Like, I'm not you have to spend X amount of time here, do every single exercise. I am like, demonstrate competency for sure, but then let's get you moving through. Let's get you as fast as possible till I can give them my own personal intellectual property, which I highly value because you can't find this information condensed in one area online, and it's because it's valuable. And people will explain it, they'll talk about it, but all the steps leading up to there, unless you've got all those steps, you're not going to understand it. And that's the sucky part, right? You can do your best, but if you're missing those core parts, you're not going to understand why there's something such as like a D7 sharp 9, or any number of combinations of symbols that you could interpret online that mean you never have to study sheet music to the same degree unless you want to. And there's many benefits to like studying sheet music versus charts and comparing and contrasting and saying, well, you did something really crazy. Why were you even thinking that? Or being like, I see what you did there. You threw a twist in. I like it. Or being like, I have this student who's 5 years old. I just need a basic version of this. Or I found this basic beginner piano music that's at least free. I'm gonna make it super complicated because I can. And so like that's the advantage of having a really strong theory background is you can do whatever you want in any direction. But
Mm.
getting there is hard. And like I swear to God, sorry, I'm rambling now. My favorite moment is watching my teenagers, especially. They've gone through that process. They had to go slower because they had to go at their speed. And they get there and they have this moment of clarity and they're like, oh, I see the matrix. And I'm like, yes, yes, you see the matrix. And they're like, oh my God, Miss B, I understand why you couldn't show me this sooner. And I'm like, I know, I'm so sorry. And we have like both a happy cry as to like commiserating over the pain to get there, but being happy we got there.
Yeah, I remember it was a lot of work. And music is always work, but it's also a lot of fun. And the more we learn, the more fun we have. And just like you said, and these breakthrough moments are wonderful, and they continue. They don't end after you get really good. I think they keep surprising you. And gosh, I mean, I feel it's kind of like when they talk about college and they tell you in college, like, well, you learned stuff here, but you're going to really start learning the first day at work. And that really hit me because I worked in television, and like we worked with a set of gear and whatnot in school. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, okay, everything's like three times the size, and like everything's like five times the speed and the pace. And like, here we go. I guess I didn't know very much at all. And so, I mean, it's that kind of wonderful thing that we go on. And being like having those fundamentals, I think it can help you as an artist so much. I mean, I've done acting and dance and all these different things. And all I can say is sometimes it's difficult to have that confidence fully in what you're doing unless you've had enough dance classes and you've done enough maybe you've done the conservatory and the ballet or whatever it is. And it's same thing, but I find it so tangible to be able to play the piano or even the guitar. And that's what I transitioned to later on was the guitar, and I sort of attached to that. And then vocally, I'm sure you have this. Students who have an ear for music have a really great ear for it, and that's the only reason I sang later on in life. I mean, why I was encouraged to was because of the ear, not because of the theory knowledge. But thank goodness I have it, because I wouldn't be able to have conversations with my bandmates or my producer or anything like that if I didn't know what the hell I was kind of
And
dealing with. So I'm not the best at it, but I enough to swim,
and
you
that's
know?
like that's what's really important is having a working knowledge. If you're going to do something really crazy, like you want to throw in a bunch of different time signatures and key signature changes, and you want to throw in this chord just because you feel like it, you don't even necessarily have to explain why it works, but you do have to be able to at least call it for what it is, rather than telling this person, put your finger here on this fret and this and on this string, and kind of
Mm,
like talking your way through. It's so time
mm.
consuming to do it that way. And then by the time that someone actually has the patience to sit there with you and sort of be like, oh, that's the sound you're going for, it's, uh, it loses the energy, it loses the vibe. You don't get people excited about your craft and what unique ideas you're putting together.
Okay, so I noticed that you were a semifinalist for not one but two competitions in 2 years back to back, and one of them in Ottawa. So that's where I hail from here, and London's Got Talent. And so, first of all, I think that's really cool because that must be speaking to you taking that encouragement from your students and putting yourself out there and being like, yeah, if I can have fun, I can compete, I can play in that yard, and um, so first of all, what I want to know is what are your thoughts on competitions? What are your thoughts on those competitions? Were they enjoyable? Were they worthwhile? As a child, I did a lot of talent competitions. Some of them were beneficial, and some of them were just really bad. Same with band things. Sometimes you sign up for a band thing, and it's like, oh, that was not a good. That's not a good deal. That's a bad deal. So yeah. Anyways, I want to hear your thoughts on these
Yeah, you're right.
competitions.
5 months before COVID was when I did the one artist competition out in Ottawa. It was absolutely like, I think a year or two before that, my students started bugging me, and that was my first, okay, I'm going to break onto the music scene seriously as Be Composed. And I'm going to do it outside of London at the insistence of one of my old vocal teachers. And I had a blast doing it. They decided to turn it into like a day long weekend affair, where basically it was about not just going to show off your original music and perform and compete, but they also offered more of a structured idea, some workshops about how to brand yourself and how to take yourself more
Mm,
seriously in music, because that's exactly what it takes. And it was the perfect
excellent.
start for me, recognizing, okay, you are here. You need your name. You need not just your name. You need your look. You need everything together. It's a full package when you do your branding and your marketing and everything. So that really helped me jumpstart then getting back here in London and hitting up open mics nonstop. I was doing like 6 open mics a week for like 4 or 5 months straight. It was insane. Just how much I tried to like network and like really build up and try to get some momentum going. And then of course COVID hit. So that was a great time to start, but it gave me the
I hear you. It hit me pretty bad too. It hit us pretty hard too, man. Oh, man. But it's good to see that you were hitting the road hard there. You were hitting the pavement hard and really grinding, and, like, open mics, aren't they so great for networking? And I loved them for the purpose of testing out songs, like brand new songs, brand new lyrics. If you can get into a sold out, like, or packed open mic, you can really get an honest opinion. It's like a comedian going to clubs and recording their sets for laughter. I lived with a comedian in Toronto for a while, and he used to, like, honestly, he put his tape recorder down on the table and he'd just be listening to see what jokes got better laughs than other laughs, jokes. You know what I mean? So it's the same thing. I find that's what they're great for. Like, you want to know if your song has some good hook to it? Go, you can find out normally. So I love it for that. And also, like, if you want to get know like figure out how to perform in front of people and be
yeah.
more comfortable.
And
Um,
also,
so that's good.
no,
Sorry, no, you go ahead.
that's the problem with doing these online interviews. You're always trying to figure out how to get the right balance. Yeah, no, the other thing too is that it really gives you a chance to. Oh, hold on. I had a thought and I lost it. Social anxiety. Um,
I have it too. Don't worry about it. And the same thing happened to me a few episodes ago. And I was like, looked at the guest. I was like, well, I I was there, and now I don't know where I
yeah,
am. But but we were talking about the competitions, and how they were a positive impact on you, it would seem, and that they taught you things, which is really, really good. That's the same thing as the live. I did the Big Money Shot here in Ottawa through the radio station years ago, and they brought speakers in and people in to teach you things and workshops. And I think that's what really does make it worthwhile. Canadian Music Week, I'll tell you. Gosh, there's a lot of sessions. There's a lot of things to go to. I sent people on my behalf, and got them to bring me like notes for like a lot of it, because honestly, it's like session after session after session. But it's good. It's good to go talk to people. It's good to go, see what's going on,
yeah,
make a
that's true.
friend. Um, so I played once in London, not at the East Side Bar and Grill. Have you ever
That
played
was
there
actually my
before?
first time going to an open mic was at the East Side one, and I went to it having no idea that that was where London's most experienced musicians essentially kick back and jam out with each other. So there's me getting up on stage for the first time in like a very public setting that was hometown. And I forget what I even did, but it was definitely not part of the typical blues and rock and roll group. It was very much pop music, and I think a lot of originals. And people were very enthusiastic. They were very welcoming, which was awesome. And then, of course, later I realized, like, oh, that could have been very bad. I could have been very deterred. But because I didn't know, it didn't happen. It went well. It was fun.
Awesome. That's awesome. I remember that it was a cool crowd. I mean, they got rowdy. Someone came up on the stage and tried to like they were like, when guys come up and they start singing on the mic and they're trying to kind of he was almost trying
Yeah.
to take it from me. And so security kind of come up on the stage and like carry him away. And we'd already given him drumsticks. We'd already given like he'd already come up and been to the drummer like, I love drummers. And we were like, okay, here's some signed drumsticks. Like, that's awesome. Like, we love it. But he was still, like, he had a little bit too much to drink. I don't fault people. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes you want to join in and do a little karaoke. I get it. Um, but that was my experience there. And people were very friendly or forward, even. I like very, I went out, I was a smoker back then. Thankfully, I've given it up for at least 6 months here. We'll keep going. But back then, I'd go out there and there was a lot of people who just wanted to who wanted to chat. So I found London quite friendly in
Yeah.
that way. Um, so what else? So we've talked about how you've got your school, Miss B School of Music and Language, and that's because you've also studied French,
Yeah,
correct?
exactly. Yeah, actually, my musical journey is not a smooth one because, like I said, I did the RCM and I got my grades high enough that I could apply to University of Music. So I applied to Western because I wanted to stay in the hometown. And I did not get into the classical program. And this also comes at a time when I was removing myself from a very traumatic situation with from my mom, who I had grown up with. And so between that, experiencing freedom for the first time, as I went into university for the first year, it was. It was a very difficult and enlightening and hard experience. Like everything is tied up in that moment where I wanted to do really well and failed because I was missing a lot of intuition when it comes to music, and I didn't know it at the time. I was doing my best. I wasn't bad, but I was missing what would have made me a great musician. And so, I ended up going to Western for English and French instead because they were second passions for me. And I knew I wanted to be a high school teacher. So I went there. The first year of university, like I said, first year of freedom, which was probably when my ADHD had the chance to reveal itself the most, which meant, of course, super
Mm-hmm.
distracted. Yeah, I have this feminist story.
I totally get it.
I have this feminist story that I won't go into the details of, but basically, someone said, you can't do X because you're a girl. And I ended up spending months studying that subject to prove them wrong. And I got very sidetracked off my music career and my school career.
Yeah, but who says something so ridiculous? Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm glad you did it. I'm glad you shoved it in their face. I mean, if there was an ounce of serious thought in what they said, then they absolutely I'm glad you taught them a good lesson. Wow. And as for schools not getting into programs, what I would say to that is that's that group of people. And that's at that time and that place in a certain day in a certain setting. And every performer needs to never forget that because, gosh, almighty, I had some difficult times in the early days. When I was a little kid, when I was like 12, I tried to do stand up comedy. Like, I really tried, like, really hard. And I don't think I was great at all. But anyways, I tried, and when I had a bad performance or had a bad reaction, it hit me way too hard, and it kind of took me out of it. And in music, I decided that's not going to be the case, and it hasn't been. And again, you go through so many humbling experiences as an artist that where you have to decide if you can handle it or not. It's like I said to someone on a show the other day, a popular bar in Ottawa that I've played there. Yes, sold out shows multiple times, but I also played there when just my dad and my cousin was there and no one else. And it took me a long time. And and like, rejection all the time as an artist. It's pretty much just like what we eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then along comes a yes, and it's like, oh, oh, really? Well, excellent. Well, then I'm ready. Of course I'm ready, and but yeah, that's always, I think that's all artists. And we go through hot spurts, cold spurts, and we get better and we get wiser. That's what I'm glad about. I do think I'm getting a little bit wiser than I was in my 20s. Oh my good
But when you think
lord.
about it, like we don't
Um
actually have to fully develop brains until the age of 25 to 27, which is why that period of time from like 18 to 24, we shove you out the door and say, make this huge financial decision for yourself and good luck. Hope it sticks. And it's absolutely insane that we do that. And I'm really glad. Like this is a horrible thing because of the pandemic, because of the financial crisis that our world is in. But on the other hand, now even some of like the Gen Xers and even some of the boomers are understanding financially the world can't keep going the way that it has been. And they're letting their, 20-year
mm,
olds or they're, just heading off to universities, they're letting their 30-year olds stay with them because economically it just makes sense for everybody. So I mean it's nice that we're seeing in some parts of the world and we're seeing some shift towards that understanding. It comes at a great cost to us, but it's good to see the shift. It's kind of like mental health. We have seen such
yeah.
a huge shift in understanding and being more compassionate about it rather than keeping it behind closed doors. And that's because of the pandemic. It's like one of the only good things about the pandemic, if you can call it good.
Yeah. No, definitely more discussion and honesty and openness. And I liked a lot of what I read again on your site. Um, Speaking about that, a lot of men have difficulty speaking about how they feel in general, with each other, especially. But I mean, I get it. I've heard all the counter arguments, as I'm sure you have, and I mean, everyone has to come to their own realization and their own place of existence. So I know we're all on our own journey. That's what I try and remind myself when I kind of get down on the world or down on what I'm seeing around me at times. And also, hey, I ain't perfect at all. And I've had my own up curve of learning as well that goes on and on and on. I had a great teacher in high school, and she was just way ahead of everyone else because she'd never stopped going to university. Like, I think she went to university for like 10 years, not for like a master's or anything. She just did like two bachelors and then another 2 years of something else. Like, she just loved university. So she was pretty worldly and very, very intelligent. And God, I hate aging myself, but but like 19, 20 years ago, she was educating us on what the world was going to be. She was talking to us about postmodernism. She was talking to us about personalities and how people are identifying and how they're going to change that, and how these archetypes are very old, and how we're coming to terms with the fact that they're not right all the time anymore. In fact, they're almost never right anymore. So, I mean, I was lucky. I had that teacher and kind of put these ideas in my head at that time. And I joined her club, which was the global education team. And again, I didn't know nothing. I mean, we were supporting LGBTQ Q and all everything else. Of course, I'm sorry about not knowing it off the top of my head, but we were supporting that. And I just knew I hated seeing people being bullied. I was a little ginger kid, so I kind of get it. Like being pushed around or told you're not good enough to play or whatever it is. It's so not cool and it's not worth it. So yeah, I really enjoy your website for that. Um, Tell me a little bit about what original metal jazz is.
um, so, like I mentioned, I've had a couple of vocal teachers over the years, mostly just did choir in high school, but took some lessons here or there. And I had two principal teachers who both told me that my voice was very jazzy, and that's what I needed to sing. Well, I want to sing pop. No, you have a jazz voice. Oh, so the closest I could get away
Mm,
with was more Broadway stuff. Which suited my fancy. I enjoy like the big grandish pieces. I love the grandiose of the music and how it flows. And orchestrated metal is absolutely fantastic. So I love Nightwish. I love Dream Theater. I love that big
mm,
sound. And my partner, who's very much into heavy metal, has been indoctrinating me into more of that sort of orchestra metal, which is awesome. But yeah, so um, yeah, in terms of metal jazz, I was like, okay, well, I really love this sound. I love Amy Lee. I was obsessed with Evanescence. That for me was like my huge principal influencer when it came to my sound, my mood, what helped me get through all the shit that I was going through at the time. So I always felt like combining that with the jazz element, with either the jazz swing or the jazz feel, maybe that's a way that I could make my voice fit the sound. And it was something that I experimented with more again when my students were bugging me, in my mid 20s to start performing more and start writing more. So the first song that I wrote, I was with a supportive partner, supportive of my music, and I wrote. It was the spooky zook as he liked to call it, which is basically just this Halloween song because Halloween's my favorite time of year, and it was like a twist on a love
Mm.
song, but also having a Halloween thing to it, but has a metal jazz feeling to it. Metal in terms of the riffs, in terms of what I visualize the sound eventually becoming, but having the jazz swing and the jazz chords and flavor as well, combined with my jazz sound. And then of course orchestra metal. You have to have like the strings involved, and you have to have all the other instruments in there too. Um, so I think I had sent you the link to our first project that I've been working with here in London. Goes by the name of Drake Campbell. We've been working together on Live to Regret, which I absolutely adore. We created this fantastic metal song together, but we're going to go back to the drawing board and we're going to figure out how we can, pump up the jazz more and insert more of that into it, which
Hmm.
is definitely the hardest part of metal jazz, finding other musicians and other people to work with who understand how to synergize the two.
Oh, absolutely. Finding lightning in a bottle. It's tricky indeed. But I listened to what you sent, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was cool, and I was getting jazz vibes through it, and I was getting the metal vibes. But yeah, you have a very good voice. I think it's a very versatile voice. Um, some would you consider yourself in the soprano range?
Funny enough, I was always kind of like treated as mezzo soprano, which my voice, I had gotten it to the point that I absolutely could hit some of the soprano notes for sure. I was hitting like the high B flats and even like D's. But over time, my voice has definitely settled into a more comfortable range of like mezzo soprano alto, especially because I use my chest voice
Okay.
so much.
Okay, well that's cool. I'm definitely an alto, for sure. And it's sopranos. I find they get kind of pigeonholed into opera or into certain styles of music just because of how high their voice is. Where, like you said, you can kind of sing the Evanescence. You can sing the metal and the different genres. It's pretty cool. Speaking of Evanescence, what other bands were you into and inspired you?
I am going to date myself here now. I very much was in that, follow along with Green Day, Rise Against, Billy Talent. That was kind of what I grew up with as a teenager. That really sort of resonated with me and sort of fed into the teen angst, which I absolutely still love. Linkin Park. Like I know that it's the cool thing to hate on it right now, but like too bad. They served their time, they did their thing, it has a place.
Art art is art. Yeah, it's interesting. It's something that we have to hold on to for our own sake, for our own selves. It's not about what anyone else says, and that's why I love rock music personally. That's my connection to it. But um, it's like you said. Sorry, now I'm blanking out for a second. But anyways, what we can go to is um. Sorry, what bands was it again you
Yeah,
were
I
saying
was gonna
just a
say like
second
Billy
ago?
Talent, Rise Against. Those are the ones I grew up
Okay,
with.
that's what I was thinking about. Okay, so Billy Talent is a very cool one because I have opened for the Lazies a few times, and the Lazies were signed by Billy Talent in Toronto at the Canadian
Mm,
Music Week, and like they came over from Australia, and boom, they got their opportunity, and so that's kind of their story. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, someone in the comments can correct me if I've got details incorrect. I do not mind being corrected, but anyways, yeah, that's what I wanted to comment in on. Um, but that's very cool. Like those bands are like you're talking about Canadian bands. You're talking about something that kind of is special. What about Avril Lavigne? Were you around during her reign? Did you like her
Yeah,
at
yeah,
all?
I very much did. She was my first proper. Someone gave me a disc, and I actually liked it, and it was mine to own, and I was really like super synced. Actually, you know what? That is a little bit of a fit. Technically, it was in sync, but I was like in grade two, and it didn't quite sink into the same level. I was not boy band crazy at that point. So during the time I would have been potentially boy band crazy, it was Avril Lavigne crazy instead. So yeah, I absolutely enjoy covering her from time to time now because people are like, "Oh my gosh, nostalgia!" And I'm like, "I know, right? This punk artist who turned very pop, and calling her punk was something that a lot of people who are enthused about pop were like, "Oh, she's not punk," and it's like, you know what? She's got the flavor, she's got some of the attitude, you know.
She was the when people have that discussion, what they need to ask themselves is, is there a punk radio station where she can make a living? And the answer to that is no, no, no. But is punk cool? Yes. And were they able to package it into a poppy package that she presented very well? Yes. And I played hockey against her one time in Napanee, when we were both about 12 or 13, and she was like the only girl on an all boys team, and she had
Yeah.
dreadlocks at the time, some kind of dreadlocks or crazy braids, I remember. And she got in a fight that day. Like, I tell people, I'm like, she fought that day. Like, she like dropped the gloves. I'm like, she was like, that's my one experience with Avril Lavigne in real life, when we were kids. And they were like, people were talking to us in the dressing room before, and they're like, she sang with Shania Twain. Like, she opened for Shania Twain, this blah blah blah. And we're like, oh, cool. And then you get on the ice, and she was pretty much a badass the whole time, which was awesome to see that, she's legit, and that they kind of keyed in on that rebelness that was in her personality, that cool persona. Um, okay, so let's get into some of the events that you are now working towards and putting on, because I think that they deserve a lot of time and a lot of focus, and I think you put a lot of work into it. So let's start with Women Rock for Men's Mental Health. And everyone, the links are below. I'm going to put them below. All the links, like Bee's website, and, where you can find stuff about her, and where you can stuff about, um, Women Rock for Men's Mental Health. So fill us in a little bit about
Yeah.
that, if you will.
So just trying to cover it from a very basic nutshell first. Basically, it's a group of women musicians, and we are rocking for men's mental health. We're putting on concerts. We're raising funds for various organizations that specifically help men. Just because there are so many that specifically help women and very few that specifically help men. When I first kind of came up with the concept, I was asking my male friends, and I was just kind of asking people who I didn't know super well, and they felt comfortable opening up. And I said, like, where would you go if you wanted to access help for yourself? And the most common answer was the bar. And then the next common answer after that was an addiction center. And the next comment after that was,
Mhm.
well, maybe there's a general resource center, or maybe I have some help through my work, but they'll just give me workbooks or group therapy instead of individual therapy. So the answers were
Yep.
wide in range, and at the same time, no one felt like they were being helped, which is really unfortunate. And I cannot attest to other places in Ontario because I know that in larger communities there is more help out there to be had. But for London, there's two, specifically for men. There is Changing Ways, which will help youth at risk, all youth at risk, and they do have a men's specific program. And there is the Canadian Center for Men and Families, and they specifically help men and men over the age of 30 with gain access to mental health services and gain shelter and aid from domestic abuse. So they help everyone who, like, for example, would have been my dad, where he was an abused parent with two kids to look after. They help them, access the services and, develop programs and do what they need to do to get away. They also help. They help men who are transitioning, and from my recollection, it's transitioning to and away from men. Like they are helping men move towards their transition, which is really important because again, like finding those resources is very difficult.
Absolutely, it is. Well, this sounds like it's very important to you and like it's a special event. So it's taking place at the Palisade Social Bowl in London. And what I would say about this as well is I'm not from London, but what I remember reading or seeing not long ago was articles about the homelessness and about the tent cities and these places that are it's skyrocketed supposedly, and it's skyrocketing everywhere, but not just in London, in Ottawa too. But they were saying it's gone up so much, and I think that it's prevalent. It's important that men's mental health be looked at very closely as well. It goes hand in hand, in my opinion. People's lives being drastically changed or potentially wrecked in several kinds of ways.
There's so many
And
factors. Like the reality is that in terms of the sudden increase, well, it's not really that sudden. It's just that now we're aware of it. Now we're aware of how dire the problem is. And in the midst of that awareness, having mental health hospitals actually closed down and people from the smaller communities who have various mental health issues being sent to places like London because they're bigger, and therefore must have more resources. Meanwhile, our own resources are not being
mm,
used the way they should. It's a travesty all the way around. And like at the end of the day, if we look at all the problems we experience as a society, we can sit here and point our fingers at men, or we can actually do something about it and help men get the help they need and help them get it not just at their current age, but hopefully preventatively help them when they're younger, help them when they're kids. So, it's the idea that if we're helping a man, we're not just helping a man, we're helping him navigate his family more healthy and passing on, generational healing to his kids. We're helping that man with his interactions with his friends and learning how to be a better support figure for the men around him as well. So I'm very much a believer in the idea that we have so many systemic problems which absolutely do perpetuate the homelessness crisis. And at the same time, if we can do it on an individual level and remove the necessity, no, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say that remove the necessity of government funds, but that's just no, that's not what I want to say at all. We desperately need the funds. We desperately need help from our government and understanding that everyone is affected, including them. They feel so removed from the problem. And so, what I have found is that when we engage not from a place of anger, but a place of compassion, and we say to even those people in power and say, hey, guess what? You might have actually learned something that's not 100% healthy, or you might have learned one way, but it turns out there's actually a better way you could have even lived. People, when they feel compassion for their story, when they acknowledge, oh, I get to have a say in this problem as well, this does affect me personally, I think that we're going to see a lot more people recognize in those systems that they need to be the ones activating change for their own sake. And like, it's funny to basically call on people's selfishness in order to heal this problem. But at the same time, if we keep alienating, if we keep going from a place of anger, we've gone as far as anger is going to take us in the last 100 years. And what I truly believe we need is the next 100 years of compassion. And that's a really hard place to work towards.
it definitely is. It's a lot, and compassion, like you said. Gosh, 100 years of it would do a lot of good, wouldn't it? And yeah, there is a lot of anger and there is a lot of frustration today going on, and I don't know, to be honest, what it is 100% what's going on in today's world. I some days I put my finger on it. One thing I like reading about that you said is you talk about triggers, and or that I read on your Instagram perhaps, was that there was something about triggers, and how we're responsible for what we feel. And I think that's so interesting, because it's such an interesting dichotomy, or thing to think about, because we look to art to be inspired, we look to people that to lift us up when we're down, and yet we need to be in control ultimately of where we're at. And I go back to my silly references of my silly survival shows, where these people are beginning to starve and they're not having a great time. And ultimately, someone can go over to them and be kind and give them compassion or inspire them by being awesome. But in the end, what keeps them staying right where they are is this thing in their gut that says, I'm not leaving. I know who I am. I know what my worth is. I know what my purpose is. And I'm grateful that I have people to support me. And yes, it's one reason I'm staying, but it's not the reason. And so, yeah, I find it very,
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
like compassion is such a vague answer, but what it really comes down to is when we have compassion for others, more importantly we demonstrate compassion for ourselves, and we do it in a really healthy way that still takes in self accountability and self forgiveness, and we learn to have grace during the moments when we're tripping and falling, and we learn to figure out how to move past our bad decisions and even move past the things that are out of our control. We basically learn how to move ourselves from victim to survivor to thriver. And that is an
Mm,
incredibly difficult process. You can never tell a victim when to move through that process, they have to choose it for themselves. And
mm,
all we can do is demonstrate that healing process ourselves. And so, this is where compassion really plays a role. When you have self compassion for your story, you're no longer begging for it from others, and you're able to give it to others easily and mean it, not just be like, oh, I feel sorry for you, but to genuinely be like, I haven't
mm,
had that experience. I can imagine how tough that is for you. XYZ must be really difficult. That sucks. And like, and you can even take it a step further and say, like, I can imagine how difficult that is. And then when someone tells you this solution, gosh, that must not feel like a solution. And people, when you address it so genuinely from that place, they'll respond and say, yeah, I know that's the solution, but I'm not there yet. I still got these steps to go through. And I think that having that conversation, even if it doesn't get them to move to the next decision, it helps them recognize that they are being seen and that they can see themselves and they can recognize for themselves, you know
mm.
what, that might be that next push to getting me to the next step of accountability.
Hmm. Absolutely. So this is a very cool, important fest, or it is a full day, right? It is a full day event. And what I was seeing about it was you've got a lot of amazing women taking part in this in different capacities. We have live artists, eight. I counted eight bands or performers or live artists. Henna tattoos, an auction, like, you've got a lot going on here, and people can get tickets at fanatickets.com. I'll put that link down there too.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And that link that there provides a couple of different options. We've got ones where you can purchase the ticket and then come to the live event. Or, let's say you're just really support the cause, but you don't think you're going to make it out, but you want to make a small donation. We've got an option up there where you can just submit $10 as well. And so you can do as many of those as you want to get virtual tickets. And we'll be sending out a link to the email addresses as well. So if that's something that you're interested in, where you want to potentially participate, but you're not in the area, and you want to support, absolutely, we would very much welcome your support.
okay, well, we should have a few Ottawa folk here that I think would absolutely want to support. Um, I mean, if we're all honest with ourselves, I don't know anybody who isn't affected by mental health. It's just, hey, it's just the way the world is right now, and probably the way it always was and always will be. So the more we talk about it, the better. So let me ask you this, because, hmm, well, I don't know. What if somebody comes at you? Have you had any aggressive men be angry with you and take offense to this? Perhaps accusing you of
Mhm.
accusing them of being the problem. Yeah, have you
I
had to
have
deal with
definitely
that?
had negative responses, and they, for the most part, have been phrased extremely well. Mostly it was people in my own life who knew me, not necessarily on a very personal front, but who knew me as a musician. And they would message me and say, B, if it was anybody else running this, I would be so skeptical because, who are women to come in and say
Mhm.
what the men's healing process should be like? And what I've done is I've had to be extremely honest with these people and say, women rock for men's mental health. It's not just about men in terms of men need to heal themselves. That is absolutely a component. That's what we're supporting because they lack the support. But there is a dual effect of this, which is that women also need to learn how to be accountable, how to emotionally regulate. We can't ask for the change in the world and not demonstrate that change as well. And there are, we have this stereotype of women being natural chatterboxes, the idea that we are naturally more talkative and so therefore we must be better communicators. And the answer is no. We often don't know how to listen, or if we do, and this is everyone, not just women, we often listen to respond rather than listening to help another person feel heard. We don't necessarily take accountability the same way because we're told to take accountability in all the wrong ways, like being responsible for other people's emotions and other people's well-being. And so of course we're, seeing all these angry videos on TikTok and Facebook and Instagram of women saying, "I'm done, I've had enough, I need a supportive partner." And it's like, yes, you deserve a supportive partner. If you're not getting that, you have a responsibility to communicate next way. And if you're still not getting that, which is totally valid, you need to be relieving these unhealthy relationships. It is okay to recognize that you entered a relationship under one understanding, have grown and realized you have a different understanding, and realize that the partnership is not going to work out. And of course, once kids are involved, that problem becomes so compounded. And the reality is that having to balance that. It's a difficult course. How do you take accountability while being in the same difficult situation? And that goes for men and for women. And all I can say is that when you do the work on yourself, you aren't going to change the people around you. What you are going to do is demonstrate your own example. And some people may allow themselves to be influenced by that, and some people may find themselves being turned away by that. When you work on yourself, when you heal yourself, you're going to lose people. You're also going to gain people you never expected. And that is one of the most frightening and powerful things that you can do for yourself is to continue your involvement, even if your situations don't necessarily change, but your understanding does.
Okay. Well, I mean, thank you very much for answering that like that. Nice, good answer. And hopefully if anyone is offended by this, I personally don't believe they should be. Like I gave everything a really good read. And the way I see it is there's a lot of excellent points raised. And the bottom line is there is not enough services for men's mental health, and there is a lot to deal with. There is a lot to go through, and it can get a lot better. Regardless, this is what I'm telling people, basically, guys who might be taking offense right now, is come on, take a look in the mirror and think a little bit about how much you can improve and how much the world can improve. And yeah, a lot of that has to do with compassion, like we've been saying, or like B has been saying, and about taking a look at things like men's mental health. And I love the fact that there's all these awesome women that are taking part in this, and I watch some videos, and very talented people, very 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 talented. So I think that's the other cool part about this is people are going to get out and they're going to get a really awesome show out of it. Um, so you like to play this piano in front of you, this keyboard in front of you, I'm guessing. It looks very nice. It's a Roland, and I like that you did the interview behind it, because all the videos, or like most of the videos that I watched in preparation, they were all, again, you were behind this keyboard. And so I don't know. Did you want to play us out? Did you want to play a song or two? As we play out, I mean, I want to say like thank you so much for coming on. Was there anything else we wanted to talk about in
Yeah,
regards to
I
that?
think we hit most of the points for sure. All I can say, I just want to emphasize because I know that I said a lot of strong things today about accountability, and that I have addressed it for both genders. I just want to very quickly emphasize that men's mental health, it's not just because men are toxic and men are unhealed and men need to be fixed. Like again, it comes down to the woman. For myself, a huge component of why I started the organization is because I was a very unhealed person. I was causing a lot of damage to my loved ones. And when I went through my healing process, I was like, wow, this was hard, and I'm a fucking woman. How hard would this be if I was a man and didn't have access to resources? And then, even more further down
Mm,
the line, realizing, shit, how hard was this for my dad? Someone who went through having an abusive
mm,
spouse with many undiagnosed mental health issues. And he was one of the ones who stayed for 17 years in a very toxic situation in order to not abandon his kids.
mm.
So it's a very unique story that I have, and it's very important that, part of the message is we all need to heal, deserve to heal. We deserve to give ourselves that level of accountability and that self-love. It's part of that.
I think that you've conveyed your compassion and your understanding in this situation very well today. Um, and also, you have some very cool manly supporters out there, I believe. I think, did I see Harley Davidson is doing
Yeah,
something?
they donated some stuff for our auction, which is really awesome. You never know. Next year, maybe we'll be able to talk them into a motorcycle package. Who knows? For this year, we're very grateful to receive their support and so many other bars, venues around town. Lots of local shops have really invested their care. And even though there's many corporations who can't because of legal reasons, they're still very much showing their support with poster engagement, which is really helpful.
And personally, a decade ago or more, I dealt with, a very painful situation involving um, a man trying to control a woman, trying to take advantage of her, and very painful situation, and that I was kind of brought into one night, and it resulted in another man's death who tried to help and get in the way of this situation. And so I just think it's so important that as men that we really do take it seriously, and it is a real thing that I've experienced. I have been there. I have seen good and evil, as you might call it. But I think what you've done today is kind of explained that maybe if there was more resources, maybe if there was a place for this other individual to go, he could have talked about his anger. He could have talked about whatever it was that he needed to get through instead of it getting to the point that it got to. Although I personally felt he was a bad person and always will. That's the way I'm tainted in that situation. I also have the perspective to know maybe things could have been different and maybe it could have been better for him. So, absolutely, I think it's an important conversation that we've had today, and that anyone who thinks that they're 100% in control of themselves, goodness me, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not there. I'm certainly not there. But
Uh,
I mean, I I come on. I wrote a song called "Crazy," which is absolutely not the most politically correct thing to do. But I mean, look, sometimes you gotta have fun with it. Sometimes you gotta enjoy that you're different and that
well,
and
and
laugh
here's
at
the thing I didn't
yourself.
understand either. It's not about being 100% in control of yourself. It's about doing your best. And when you do your best and things still shit the fan, sorry, shit hits, oh my God,
Yeah,
when shit still hits the fan, it's about owning it, right? It's about taking accountability. You're allowed to screw up. You're allowed to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, mess it up, ruin a relationship. You're allowed to do that. It's about how do you fix yourself after the fact and how do you try to take accountability and do right by others. That's all we're doing at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to Be Composed joining me here today on All Worn Out.